She was only 22 when she played out the ultimate adolescent fantasy. A hopelessly romantic college girl who suddenly became queen in a faraway land, making history not only as the last Queen of Sikkim, but also as the only American girl to become Queen of Sikkim. Her life really does prove that fantasies can become realities, but beyond that, it also shows that fairy tales can turn into terrible, terrible nightmares. What happened to Hope Cooke, and where is she 6 decades later? Before we go into that, do like this video and subscribe to this channel. Let's get into where it all started. Hope Cooke was the smart, gentle, dark-haired girl from New York City when she met Prince Palden Namgyal, the crowned prince of Sikkim, a small kingdom in Asia. The prince was a determined ruler who hoped to improve the condition of his tiny mountain kingdom. Aside from that, he was also a widower with 2 young boys and a little girl. This sort of explains why he was lonely, and like many who knew him described, he had sad, sad eyes. He really needed a companion, or maybe a replacement for his late wife. And there came Hope Cooke. In 1959, Cooke was only a freshman majoring in Asian Studies at Sarah Lawrence College, where she lived with actress Jane Alexander. Satisfying her unending thirst for adventure, she went on a summer trip to India as a student, and that's where she met Prince Palden Thondup Namgyal of Sikkim. They met precisely in the lounge of the Windermere Hotel in Darjeeling, India. Yet, in spite of an age difference of 16 years, cultural differences, and marital status, they were drawn to each other. And 2 short years later, in 1961, their engagement was announced. They eventually got married in March 1963 because, well, astrologers in both Sikkim and India warned that 1962 was not a good year for marriages. The wedding ceremony was nothing short of amazing. It was the biggest news in town and was attended by dignitaries including members of Indian royalty, Indian and Sikkimese generals, and the then US ambassador to India. It totally made the press go crazy. And as if the marriage between a common American girl and an Asian royalty was not surprising enough, Cooke was made to renounce her United States citizenship to show the people of Sikkim that she was not an extension of America in Asia. Getting married to a stranger in a strange land, becoming a mother of 3 stepchildren at a young age, and renouncing the American citizenship sure does seem like too much sacrifice. Why did Cooke choose to go through all that? What was she searching for? Could it be something about her childhood? Well, who is Hope Cooke? Cooke was born in San Francisco to John J. Cooke, a flight instructor, and Hope Noyes, an amateur pilot. She was raised in the Episcopal Church before her mother died in January 1942 at the age 25, when the plane she was flying solo crashed, which was not so surprising. After her mother's death, Cooke and her half-sister Harriet moved to New York to live with their maternal grandparents, Helen and Winchester Noyes, the president of an international shipping brokerage firm. This explains why Cooke was raised in wealth. Unfortunately, ill luck struck again, and her grandfather died when she was 12. Her grandmother could only live 3 years after that. She soon passed away, leaving Cooke and her half-sister all by themselves. Soon enough, Cooke moved in with her aunt and uncle, Mary Paul and Sheldon Chapin, who was a former U.S. ambassador to Iran and Peru. There, she studied at the Chapin School in New York and attended the Madeira School for 3 years before finishing high school in Iran. It was an unfortunate childhood, filled with sorrow and loneliness, the shadow of which she carried into her youth. While it is true that her attraction to the Crown Prince may have been inspired by her love for the Asian culture which she studied, her thirst for some kind of acceptance and belonging was no doubt a major contributor. For Namgyal, his attraction to her was in part caused by his need to find a mother for his children, as well as the similar childhood experiences they had. But, whatever the case might have been, it wasn't enough to make their marriage last. Hope Cooke, who loved adventures, could even have been more excited about the idea of dancing in her little mountain palace than she was with the moody king. Yet, One of the most touching aspects of the marriage is Cooke's delight in recapturing childhood through her affection for her three stepchildren, who she seemed to love quite as much as she loved her own children when she eventually had them. She also made a strong resolution to reverse the ill luck that had saddened her childhood and her husband's. These children will be happy. The wheel of unhappiness that both my husband and I grew up on will not go to this generation. Those were the thoughts that guided her actions day by day. But unfortunately, the monsters in Cooke's fairy tale appeared again, a few years into their marriage. Life as queen. Time passed, and despite the son and daughter she bore for Namgyal, who was already king, the days grew longer and the hours emptier. At that time, the kingdom faced some threats from India, which really affected its finances. Yet, in spite of the problems, the king managed to maintain a love affair with a married woman in Belgium. Unfortunately, he wasn't quite smart with it, as he even flew to visit his lover a few weeks before Hope's child was born, and kept the letters she wrote to him carelessly enough for Hope to see them. As expected, Hope was shattered. She started secretly drinking beer in the mornings and living on cigarettes for the rest of the day. Out of frustration, she began an affair with an old friend on one of her yearly trips to New York. While all that was going on, the kingdom's independence was shaking, and to make matters worse, Nehru, a politician who had carefully preserved Sikkim's autonomy under the terms of a protectorate, died. This made King Namgyal begin to drink himself to a stupor and threw temper tantrums. His life and kingdom was falling apart. The fall of Sikkim. Although Namgyal saw what was coming, we're not sure if it was exactly as he expected. India finally closed in on Sikkim in a terrible disgrace. Namgyal was confined to his palace under house arrest, after which his reign was brought to an end on April the 10th, 1975. Just then, Hope left Sikkim to return to the United States with the 4 youngest children to spare them the house arrest that was imposed on their father. Yet, what was most interesting about their parting was the coldness with which she bade her husband farewell. A few days later, she was back in the United States putting on a short dress for the first time in 11 years. Even though Cooke had left royalty, she still had a loyal heart. Out of respect to the husband she had left behind, she cut short the affair she had started with her American friend to begin life afresh. She had just left a marriage that was the product of personal delusions, buried miseries, and childhood pains, and was responsible for 4 innocent children. Sadly, the royal couple divorced in 1980, and just 2 years later, Namgyal died of cancer in 1982 in New York City. A divorced Hope Cooke. With child support from Namgyal and an inheritance from her grandparents, Cooke rented an apartment in the Yorkville area of New York City. This time around, she felt really displaced in the city, and so started going on walking tours, studying Dutch journals, old church sermons, and newspaper articles to get familiar with the city again. Soon, she began lecturing on the social history of New York and wrote a weekly column, Undiscovered Manhattan, for the Daily News. She also became a successful author, with her books gaining recognition and winning awards. In 1983, Cooke remarried to Mike Wallace, a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and distinguished professor of history at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, although they're divorced now. The former queen lived in London for a few years before returning to the United States, where she now lives in Brooklyn and currently works as a writer, historian, and lecturer. She is also a regular contributor to book reviews and magazines, changing her recognition from a former Asian queen to a voice in the arts. This is the story of Hope Cooke, the last Queen of Sikkim. What do you think about her life and circumstances? Do let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't. See you soon!